All right, we are live. What's up, Veteran Trash Talk? What's going on, Gruntworks Nation, and anybody watching in the interweb universe that Elon Musk has created somewhere out there? We don't know where you're watching from, but welcome. We are in part two of our three-part series with Army veteran Ken Hewitt. All right, with financial advising from Ken Hewitt at VanderbiltSecurities.com. Make sure you look at that logo down there or scan that QR code up there and get all the information that you need. And that way you can get a hold of Ken and talk about what we're about to talk about on the show. And the key title to this is something we covered on the Trash Talk Hour a couple of months ago about scammers and scamming the veteran community, and how even though the majority of veterans are on social media on multiple platforms, we're one of the most targeted audience for scams. And of course, it comes to financial security and money. All right, that's the last thing we want to get scammed on, and it can really put a big dent into your life, into your family, and into your just your overall concerns. So that's why we started at last. Our first show was introducing Ken and talking about why it's important, all right, to have a financial advisor, especially with veterans that have TSPs. All right, what's that money doing? And we'll talk about that later in the show about when we go over what we talked about in the show prior. But today, all right, we're going to talk about how do you avoid the scammers. And one of the things, before we get into your background and about investment and financial business, it's crucial to remember that scams are a significant concern for our viewers. It's our responsibility, especially mine as the Big Earl. All right, it's my responsibility to make sure that our viewers are not getting scammed. All right, so let's start by asking you, the expert, Ken. All right, the old Army guy. All right, how do we not get scammed in this?
Well, this is going to be, I think, very helpful for the viewers. If they're watching this, they're going to see us do it live. But if you just type in your search bar, brokercheck.com, and I'm going to ask Chris to go ahead and take us to brokercheck.com. What you'll do, if any advisor you're talking to, if they have a securities license, that means if they have either a 6, a 7, 63, a 65, there's all these different licenses, they will come up in this broker check. So if you type in my name and then you type in the firm I'm with, which says Vanderbilt, if you look at that, you know what, Chris, can you get rid of that private box? I can't see what I'm doing here. Where it says a private chat, I can't see my.
Oh, you'll have to click that, Ken. You click that. You click that yourself.
Yeah. All right, guys. All right. So what you first see, I'm putting my mouse over. It says regulated broker, and then right under that it says investment advisor. Now, click in there. Am I running this, Chris? Or you? Yeah. So when you're looking at a broker, an investment advisor. By the way, if it says investment advisor, that means I can give advice for a fee, which default makes me a fiduciary, which we'll get into again later. But if you go left to right, you'll see 0 disclosures, 31 years in the business. But disclosures mean I have 0 written complaints. That doesn't mean that in the 31 years that I've been doing fee-based work, people haven't always been happy, but we've never got it to the point where they got so upset, they wrote about it, they sued me, whatever. That's very rare from what I've been told, even if you're only in the business 5 years, to have 0 complaints. So that's one of the things you're looking for. And then it tells you I've passed 4 exams. If you want to go to that, Chris, you can go down. And this just shows you that I have my Series 63, my Series 7, and fee-based. 7 is the broadest license that you can get in our business. But let's bring up, my firm gave me permission to bring in this guy's name who's actually been barred. So you see this guy here, it says 1 disclosure. Click in there, Chris. And it says he's barred from the business. Now, the reason he was barred, FINRA, who regulates us, wanted him to answer some questions. He refused, and he voluntarily said, okay, I'm out of the business. But here's the weird thing. He's still technically in the business because he kept his insurance license. So just because we get barred from securities does not mean the insurance industry. So they're a little bit more lax. So that's how you look at somebody. But I would tell you, any broker that you're talking to, any investment advisor that you're talking to, they're going to be in here. Now, there is one exception. If they're a registered investment advisor, federally only, you have to go to a different site. We could do that. And that site is advisorinfo.sec.gov. Can you bring that up? Now, if you type in my name, I'm the first one. So you might say, well, Ken's a registered. No, I'm not actually. I'm an investment advisor rep, which means I work with a firm called Consolidated Portfolio. I will tell you, if I wanted to be a registered investment advisor, I could. It would be a matter of changing some stuff. I just don't want to do it because I have a broker dealer that has all the legal stuff that protects me. If I wanted to be solely a registered investment advisor, standalone, I'd have to have literally a legal firm that does everything for me. I actually have that now. But if you didn't find this person under broker check, you would want to look here. If you don't find them in either one of these places, then more than likely they are just an insurance agent and they're limited to what they can do. Life insurance, fixed and indexed annuities, limited. So I don't think that's the person I would want handling my stuff, my wife's stuff, my brother's, I want somebody who's truly a professional, who's gotten all the licenses.
But now, Kat, I don't know if we're allowed to talk about it, and you can stop me if we can't. But this guy who we looked up before, and it says Bard, but like you said, he's this Joseph Vanilli guy. He's still able to sell insurance, and is that because insurance is regulated by a different source?
Yeah, you could look the guy up in that state and see if he's got any infractions there, but he was doing enough of annuity business that he really, I guess, didn't care. But he still got barred. I mean, who wants to get barred? I wouldn't want to be barred. I wouldn't want that on my record. And besides, I can do stocks, bonds. I can do actually investment advising, and I would consider myself a professional. And anybody who does the same stuff. But you want to look at their, have they been in this business? Like 31 years I've actually been in the business 42 years. I started at John Hancock as an insurance agent, and it took me a while to realize I didn't have all the stuff I needed to really expand in this business. I'm at that point now. It took me a few years to get it right. I guess I was a stubborn Army guy.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we talk about that in the Trash Talk Hour all the time. Is always making yourself more valuable, right? To where don't just settle, and being like I think it's an old, an old play line where it's like you could be the king of your own peanut, right? But it's like if you want to make yourself more valuable, how do you get out and make it happen? So I do want to take a little bit of time to talk about that because I know we're about to get into again how you got started in the financial sector. But so when you get into that, also maybe talk about what made you expand? What made you say I need to be, besides the obvious, what is it for the veterans watching that made you say I need to be licensed at more things?
Well, I'll go back. So my dad died when I was 11 years old, and all he had was SGLI insurance from the Army. And at the time, it was only $10,000. Not, I think, the $400,000 it is today. Okay. And he died in Europe, so we didn't even have a funeral for him. We couldn't afford it. So I really learned the value of life insurance. And I had this sergeant who, when he realized I wasn't going to stay in, he said, "Hey, Ken, you ought to go in the insurance business because we need honest people." Now, this was in the early 80s. So I got into the insurance business, and, I worked for John Hancock, and great company, but it took me a couple of years to realize there was a bigger world out there, and I wanted to be part of it. I had people who really liked me. "Hey, Ken, can you do this for me?" "No." "Can you do this?" "No." "Well, I wish you could because I like you, and I really don't like the person I'm dealing with." So I started, my research, and I had CPAs and attorneys that were friends. And they go, well, yeah, Ken, you need to get the securities licenses, and you really need to drop your hat with John Hancock and go to the independent firms. So it took me a while, but I got there. And I've been there. I've been at it a while now, 31 years. I've had all the licenses. So.
Yeah, and 31 years. And those of you watching and listening later, all right, Ken and I, we like to indulge in the cigar once in a while, maybe with a little bit of bourbon. And Linda says hi, welcome, Linda. And we got James, 61-year-old veteran who shared his story there. Appreciate that, James. And then so if you he's talking about how he tried to complete suicide and didn't. So I'm glad you're here, James. I'm glad you didn't complete it. And then maybe as a reference, James, to the veterans you're taking care of, part of the overall well-being is, physical, spiritual, monetary well-being, right? Like you want to be able to go to sleep at night going, I have a plan. All right. Now life happens, which we'll get into later, but I have a plan, right? And if this plan goes 80% of how I want it to, I'm going to be okay. Right. So, James, thank you for sharing that information with us, and then also share this with your with the people you bring in there, because this will also help as part of the whole system. So, all right, sorry, go ahead, Ken. I was just addressing James's comment.
Well, no, that's good. So once I got all the licenses, it took me a while to fill out. You got to have a process for your work. Chris, can you bring up the process PowerPoint slides? Because I think this is how I start with everyone. Okay, so it tells you I'm a fiduciary. As a fiduciary, I have to put by law that client's interest in front of mine. But we start with the discovery meeting, and in that meeting, I gather all the information about you. Married, single, widowed. What is your situation? Your pensions. You have real estate. We even get into wills and trust. I was just talking with a client the other day, a new client, and he was telling me that he's got some property in New Mexico and Texas. And what would I recommend on this? I said, you ought to have a trust, a revocable trust, because if you have properties in different states and you die, then you're probated in each of those states. If you have a revocable trust, you put everything in the trust and you just save it. So that came up in the discovery meeting, and he found that very valuable. So in discovery meeting, I'm asking questions and I'm finding out stuff. Can you go to the next slide? So I do get a lot of information, but it's strictly confidential. I cannot give your information to anyone. There is, like I told you earlier, by having the securities license, by having the fiduciary license, by being an investment advisor, I do have a compliance team, and they're really like my legal department that keeps me in check. And that very last point says they see whatever I do, but they would never contact you. They're going to contact me and say, hey, Ken, you really can't say that, and so they help keep my fiduciary tables alive. But so the process is I learn about you, and then we start to build out a plan. And I think the next place we ought to go to is the risk analysis PowerPoint slides. Chris. So I like to start here. I like to go to the budget, but can you open that up as a PowerPoint slide? So we're not going to go through every one of these, but if you go to the next slide, this is one of the things we're looking at. What's your time horizon? Do you have a tax problem? What's your investment objective? So there's about 15 slides. So we can just get out of that. We don't need to spend a lot of time on it. But this is done with every single client, where we find out where you are from a risk standpoint. Are you taking on too much risk? Are you taking on too little risk? So that's one of the places we like to start. And
go ahead. Sorry.
You go ahead.
No, I like that, because those of us that have been in the military for a while, or those who just got out, and those that we're looking at to where, how do we help what you've saved at making not a lot of money, but you saved your whole life and you wanted to start working for you, just like in the military, especially combat arms, where we're oftentimes asked to do a lot without having everything that we need. right? And so we absolutely take risk where we need to take risk, and then we put emphasis on what's going to get us the most return on personnel, right? So like this is something that should resonate with veterans, that what kind of risk are we taking, and is it important to take this risk, and here's why. So go ahead.
So one of the things, by the way, that I do, but we might want to go ahead and open up Money Guide, Chris. Or do I need to do the share screen now, or are you ready for me?
Yeah, so those of you watching who are jumping on live right now, okay, this is part 2 of our 3-part series with the Army veteran Ken Hewitt. This show is specifically on avoiding scammers and showing the tool that Ken uses to help show you as an investor, as somebody who wants financial security, of what you are going to have to do, all right, to get to where you want to get. And then we got Justin on the chat thread. I'm not going to lie, I'm a bit of a dumbass with money. That's fine. We all are, except for Ken. All right. So let's just let that's a good segue into this.
Chris, do you see my screen now?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, you're live.
You're
Okay.
live. You want it.
So one of the places that I like to start, it's very simple, is a budget. And the budget that I use, it's seen by me and my clients. So what you're seeing right now, this is a sample one that we actually did on Nick and his wife. Now, these are numbers that I made up, okay? Because, I didn't want to sit here and train him how to do this. But
yeah, because otherwise I'm not going to pay you for it.
Right. So what we have his current budget while he's working, and then we have the number one goal of most Americans is being set for retirement. So what we did with Nick is we got what his current budget while he's working, and then his retirement budget. But what I like about what you're seeing right here, everything's categorized. So we see his income and his monthly expenses, but at the very bottom, what is his total monthly? And does he have an excess or a shortfall? We never want to see a shortfall, but we do see it at times. But I actually, on every meeting that I do with clients, because I have them all over the state and some around the country, we do online meetings and we record it. Now, I have been told by clients they've never known of any other advisor that would do a video recording. They were afraid to. Well, I do it because have you ever gone to a meeting, and you might be watching this right now, and you might say, hey, that was really good. Those stories were good that Ken went over. But a week later, you might remember 10% of it. So when I'm having meetings with client, we record it. I said, we're not going to have that. We're going to record it, we're going to have it. But as an example, if I go to income, you can see it's all broken out. So we've got Nick in this RV pension at retirement. He's not taking it now. He's got his rental income. Anything we have in here, we're going to have. What is this Social Security? It's all here. If I go down as an example to our home. So Nick's got this home. We put in what is he paying for his mortgage. He plans to have that paid off at retirement. So this is really valuable because if a client goes out here and they fill this out, I see it. I sometimes help them fill it out, but it's always live for both of us. So it's a very, very good tool.
Yeah, that's an awesome tool because, I want to hit on that again for those watching and those listening on the podcast later, is that when they go to your website, when they contact Ken Hewitt at VanderbiltSecurities.com, or they call the number or they scan the QR code up there, and you go through your first, initial meeting, and then we get on this worksheet, we get on this tool. And you talk about how life happens. We'll get into that a little bit later, I think. But I'm allowed to go in there and fill that out like, hey, I might not have this house paid off now until this date, right? Something like that. Is that what you're talking about?
That's right. So, I like to start with the budget because if you don't know what you're spending, what your income is, how can I help you? I mean, are you spending more than you should be? So the budget is the basics, but it's very basic. But what helps about us is we see it. Now, what I just brought up right now, this is, again, a hypothetical portfolio that we did on Nick. But remember we talked about the risk evaluation. What's really good is when I enter your investments into our program, it actually tells us the risk, where you're at from a risk standpoint. Now, Nick has been pretty risky. He's got a 14% large cap stocks. He's got it's pretty risky. I'll just say that. He's got mid cap.
All in bourbon companies.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
here's the thing. If Nick would have had this portfolio during the Great Recession, which was back in '07 to '09, this portfolio would have dropped 51%. He would have lost half his money. Now, there might be people say, well, that's pretty stupid, Nick. Not really, because typically this portfolio does great over long periods of time. So from the end of '09, this same portfolio would have quadrupled in value. This is great. This is where you should be. This is the kind of portfolio I would expect a client to be up until about the age of maybe 55, or 5 to 6 years before retirement. So once you get to retirement, we're going to take a look at this and we're going to take some of this risk out. But that's where, when we fill it out, our program actually shows us where you stand from a risk standpoint.
Yeah,
So,
this is awesome.
yeah, it's pretty cool. Do you have any questions on that, Nick, that you want me to go over?
Just again to make sure that the people who are listening and watching is we're going over a hypothetical situation with me and my wife about, hey, where we're at, where we want to be, and where my investments are. So even at a minimum, I would say just calling you and getting an initial talk with you, it might open up your eyes to, like, you might be doing some really, really dumb things with your money. Like, and here's where we can cut that out and make it triple in the future, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, the next place I'm going to go to is what we're going to look at. This is hypothetically, I've got everything about you. I know what your house, got your cars, got your real estate investments, whatever you have, your portfolio, maybe your TSP. It's all been built into our program. And again, when I do an online meeting, we're doing this. I'm showing you your plan as we're going through it. So you're just sitting in your house or your home comfortably. But one of the things that we really like, that I like about this tool, is called What You're Afraid of. And so what we're looking at is, for Nick's overall life, if he just looked at his needs only, that's his living his life, paying his bills, paying his electricity, needs only, he's got an 89% probability of success on everything we looked at. We had needs and wants. It didn't change much because he didn't put a whole lot. He does have needs, wants, and wishes. He was going to leave some money to a charity at his death. Everything looks pretty good. But where we look at is what happened. We look at each one of these categories. A great recession would be like we had before. What if there was a great stock market crash? The one I like to go to, because a lot of people bring it up, and Nick, Social Security. I think you were saying something to me the other day about that, Nick.
Yeah, I was, because I got a letter that said on the current path that we're on with Social Security, by the time that I'm eligible to collect Social Security, I will be getting about 80% of if I was at that age right now, and that maximum benefit I'm supposed to get, because it's going to run out.
I'd like to see that letter. I think what you got, when you get a letter from Social Security, it shows you what you can take at the earliest age, 62. Then, or you can wait to full retirement age. For most of us, it's 67. For some of us, it's right now 66 or whatever. I think that's the letter you got. So if you take benefits at 62, you're taking about a 30% cut. But I'd like to see that letter. Maybe they are saying by 2034, if nothing changes with Social Security, we're going to have about a 25% cut. So
right.
Now,
that's pretty much what that letter said.
So if I take this out, now let's say we've already put Nick's Social Security in there, and we take a 25% cut, we can see what that would do to the plan instantly while we're talking. It didn't really hurt Nick that much because, Nick, I actually put a great Army pension in there for you. But if I had somebody who didn't have let's say you were in the military, maybe you were a Marine or Navy or whatever, but you didn't retire, so you don't get the pension. Social Security is going to be a lot more valuable. Sometimes I run this test, and 25% just destroys the plan. But if I have people who are like Nick, he's got this great pension, it doesn't really hurt him, okay? But we can run this and we see exactly what happens right away. Now, if I click this out, and so now I want to go, what if Nick had a great pension cut, though? Have they ever talked about cutting your military pension, Nick?
They have. So the CBO, again, it depends on what news source you watch, but the CBO asked for an audit right, of what would happen if you made over $100,000 a year, and if we cut your pension by 20% and we cut your disability by 50%, you still got to keep your disability like rights for care, but we're taking away some of that money. They didn't say they were going to do it, but somebody in that CBO asked, "Hey, run those numbers, see what that looks like."
Well,
So let's say they cut my
didn't hurt you that much until we got to the wishes.
right. So let's say they cut it by 20%. They cut my disability payment, which is also in my retirement. Let's say they cut that by 20%.
Well, I don't have the disability on here.
Okay,
but
so for the retirement, same thing. Cut it 20%.
Great recession, that's investment losses.
Yep.
So it just depends on where we're at.
No, go to cut and pension. Let's say they took it out of, because let's say they take it. We can talk about that in a different show on how that works. But they cut.
We're going to cut both yours and Rebecca's.
Right.
So that hurt you because your needs and wants dropped to 79. It didn't destroy you, but the reason we do this, just so you know, is if I'm talking with a client, if we run any of these tests and there's one that really hurts, then that's what we focus on. Okay. So that's one of the things we do. One of the last things we do, or do you want to stick on here or you want to go someplace else, Nick?
No, I think we're good there. We can always go back to it, right? Yeah, I think we're good there.
Yeah, we can go back. So we're going to go to what if. This is a pretty fun tool.
Yeah, I like the what if game.
The other day.
Yeah.
I did change some. So what I did is I have to run a current, and then I made the what if exactly the same stuff. But we're going to scroll down. So we have Nick retiring at 65 and Rebecca. If you wanted to change that and see what that would do, give me some ages, Nick.
Yeah, let's say, you know what? I don't like working, and I want to just play golf every day, not 3 times a week, every day. And the only way I'm going to do that is I got to be out by the time I'm 62. And
62.
Or let's even drop it to 55. You know what? Drop it to 55. You know what? I like this life. I want
about
this life.
Rebecca? Is she going to continue to work while you're taking this time off? Or?
No, she's cutting it too.
So is she going to 55 as well?
Yeah, 55 as well.
Okay. So now we're live doing this immediately. Clients love this. Well, they've told me they do. So that took. Well, this is real. You stayed at 90%. So there must be something. You know what it is? Your pension kicked in.
Right.
So what happened is you weren't going to start your pension until you hit retirement. So it actually increased you. Okay. So let's run some others. That wasn't bad. We're going to keep you at 55. Now I've got you both taking 65,000. Is that? Let's change that number, Nick.
Yeah, we'll have to change it because we're retiring earlier, so there'll be less in it.
So how much do you think you would want to take?
What are we saying about? Let's say about 5%. Let's say I'm investing 5% of $100,000 a year salary, right? A year. So now that's 10 years. It's $50K off of that. Yeah, that's where. Hey, are you willing to risk what you're putting?
We always want to look at the problem. If we go less, we know that's going to work. So we want to make this number. What if you needed to spend more?
Yeah, we got to. Let's say let's say because I'm retiring early and I still want to travel more. Let's say I want to spend $85,000 a year.
All right. And we'll just do that on you because you're both together.
Yeah, and now again, people watching, this is the things that I know for a fact a lot of you listening and watching don't do.
Now that was an effect because you went from 90% to 61. So
now, what does that percentage mean? My percentage of
what this program does is it's running Monte Carlo. It's looking at thousands of scenarios with all of your investments, with your pensions, with Social Security. What's your probability of success? So you went from 90 to 61. Okay, so I would probably think 61. Don't feel real good about that. We might want to go back to that 85. Maybe we change that to 75. Okay. And that's what clients do. I mean, this is just regular conversations. So I'm going to hit the calculate the scenarios. Now you took you up. That's still pretty good, 79. There's a lot of other stuff. We had you buying a truck every 8 years. We had your vacation. So we go through, we look at all these things until the client feels comfortable because we've designed it. So the what if is very helpful. And what I'll say on this is you develop a financial plan, but you have to know it's going to change. Nothing's stagnant. Something's going to happen. Maybe you're going to, matter of fact, we should have done that. I'm going to go back, show you something pretty cool on the what you're afraid of. I forgot. I just remembered right now. One of the things that, you know, I started my career as a life insurance agent, and I still sell life insurance because it's needed. Because, like I said, my dad died when I was a kid. So, what if you died too young? Let's say that, now we got you, let's say that Nick died right now. How much life insurance does Nick need? What this program's doing, it's calculating, it's got all your investments, your pension. So, Nick, if you died right now, your probability of success for your wife is 41%. So what this will do, it's going to tell us really how much term insurance you need. Most people, terms are out to go. I know if you got your whole life and you've kept it, go ahead and keep it. But this here is running an analysis on how much coverage you need and for how long you need it. So this is really cool. So Nick, this is saying that right now, this year, you need 1.7 million of term, but you won't need it in 25 years. Well, 30 years, it says you need 135. So you're lacking on the insurance. But term insurance is pretty darn cheap, even at these numbers. So I used to hear when I was at John Hancock, well, people need 7 times their income. And I used to ask, but why? I mean, what if they've got a pension? What if they got this? So if you've got a great pension and you hit 65, you don't really need life insurance anymore. But your pension's not enough to offset your stuff because it's telling you need it for a while. But this
that's a really good point because there's a lot of veterans getting out that have the term life because whole life policy companies won't take them because they have PTSD, right? And they could be the healthiest people on the planet, like myself. I was rejected for a whole life because I have PTSD, and they're worried about me completing suicide, and they don't want to take me on. So what you're saying is, if the hypothetical situation we made up for my wife and I is that if I want her to be successful, and the what if game, if I die now, what does she need to have in the bank to do that?
Yeah, it says right here. What happens if Nicholas dies early? This is how much Nick needs to keep his wife in the world that he's providing. So we're not guessing anymore. We're not saying, oh, you need $1 million or you need 500,000, which is how it's done for most people in the business. And these are people that only do life insurance. They don't have a securities license. But I would say you want someone who's got the full, scoped up. And if anybody came in late, you might just want to remind them that you can go to Broker Check to look me up and look up any advisor, and it tells you our record, our licenses. But I remember that this is a pretty neat tool. And the thing I would say is, imagine I'm on a call with any of you. We're recording this, and you're going to have this video right on your computer forever because I store it too. But clients like that. So I'll tell them, hey, can you remember that? I'll go look at the videos. I go, well, I remember what video it was, and sometimes I have to remind them.
No, that's great. And that's a good point to everybody watching and listening later is, again, this is Army veteran Ken Hewitt. All his information's down there. It costs, how much does it cost him for you to call and get an initial screening?
Okay, so my first meeting, I work sort of like, I would say like attorneys. A lot of times you hear attorneys, hey, the initial consultation's no cost. That's what I do because I never know what I'm going to do. And the first meeting is what I call the discovery meeting. So we ask a lot of questions. So let me tell you how it works. If you're somebody who's got investments and I'm going to help you with those investments, and I think you're going to want me to help you, unless you want to do it. If you want my assistance where I manage those investments for you, I help you, We do all that. We do whatever the insurance. I do all the stuff for you. We have a rule in our business called know thy customer. So I have to know this stuff anyway, and I don't charge because you're a client. But if I've got someone else who says, "Hey Ken, I'm a do-it-yourselfer, but I really like this program, and I want you to set me up, and I want you to be advising and counseling me," then I will tell you at the end of that meeting, within maybe that day or in a couple of days, it's okay. This is what I think would be a fair fee to charge you, maybe quarterly. You could fire me at any time, but you'll have that, and the person you're deciding if that's fair or not. But I would say that about 85% of the people I deal with, I just handle their stuff for them and I don't charge them. But about 15% are do-it-yourselfers, but they do like my counsel and they hire me to, do this kind of stuff, set up their plans, have it so that they can look at their stuff. They call me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that because I'm this way. Like I work hard. I wanna build my nest egg, but what am I missing? Do I have enough time to look into what I'm missing? And now I want to rely on my veteran community to help me, right? And Ken Hewitt, all right, is an Army veteran that we trust. Okay, so get on there and ask him a question. All right, don't ask the Big Earl. In fact, go ahead and ask me. I'm going to refer you right to Ken again because, like I said, I know Ken. Was in the same neighborhood as Ken. I know where he lives for crying out loud. Like he's gonna take care of you. And here's a perfect example. The field OP, who's an awesome follower of Veteran Trash Talk. All right, he's got a confirmational bias on life insurance because you can tell he exploded there. It says whole life policies sell trash, value policies, buy term and invest the difference. All right. I'll let Ken answer that in a second, but in my opinion, me reading that and listening to Ken is that might be true for you. And that's exactly what this tool is going to show the person who is right now looking for a term life or a whole life and doesn't know what to do. So, Ken, what do you think about that?
Like I said, I started at John Hancock many years ago, and it was all whole life. That's what they pushed. As I expanded, I'm one of these guys who's always questioned everything. And I realized term was the route to go, buy term. There are times, there are whole life, but if you've got a whole life contract that you've had for a long time, you should keep it. They have a value, but the problem I have is I have a friend of mine that's a New York life agent, and he pushes whole life all the time. But what I don't like about that is if he's dealing with a 25 to 30-year-old couple, if they buy whole life, they don't have any money left for investing.
Right.
They're making the whole life their investment. And I would tell them, buy a 30-year term policy. If you can get a 40-year term, let's find it. But you want to invest. They can't put money in their 401ks. They can't put money in their IRAs because it's all time. Every expendable money they have is in that whole life, and it's locked up. If I got an investment, my money's liquid from that day, and I have choices. So that's the problem. I'm not going to sit there and say that whole life's horrible. There are times where it's good, and if you've had it, you should keep it, because then if you've had it long enough, the advantage of whole life. Because I buy it as a 25-year-old, I'm a 25-year-old on that whole life, and 30 years from now, I'm still paying the rate of a 25-year-old. That's the advantage. But the disadvantage is to get that you have to pay so much more money than if I bought a term. I'll put it this: I could buy $1 million of term life for what $50,000 a whole life would give me. Well, if I die, what do I need? So my dad had little, $10,000 of insurance when he should have had $150,000. And the only thing he could have done that is if he would have bought like a 20-year term. And my mom's life would have been a hell of a lot better. I'll just say that.
No. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, it's probably part of the reason it fueled you to get that, like you said earlier. And hey, the field OP, thanks for that comment, because I'm pretty sure Ken just pretty much agreed with you. And said that you buy term and have money to invest when you're younger. So no, that's great information, Ken. And I want everybody to understand that this is part 2. All right, we're going to have part 3 probably about another month, maybe a month and a half. All right, part 1, if you go back on our YouTube channel, right, and look at it, read it, he goes through his entire process, right? And that entire process, again, think about it as death by PowerPoint. However, if you want somebody, all right, to take care of this for you, okay, if you want somebody to look at what you're doing and then tell you where you're doing it wrong, and me as a former infantry guy, right, I'm cocky, airborne, ranger, all that cool stuff, but I always relied on my battle buddies in my group to let me know when I was doing something wrong or tell me a better way to do it. All right, and that's why we're bringing in Ken to you guys. That's why Ken is here. All
By
right.
the way, are you looking at this, what I have up here or not?
The questions?
No, where it says needs, wants, and wishes. Do you see that?
I see it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm only bringing that up because I did this hypothetical plan on Nick and his wife, Rebecca. But if you'll notice, we have what does he need for his everyday expense? What does he need for health care? What does he need for car and travel? So this is his everyday life. Wants is he wants to increase his, so he's got travel of 5,000. But what if he wanted to spend an additional 10,000? So
right, because I want to go to Europe. I don't want to go to Cancun, which is cheaper with the college kids. I want to go to Europe with the older people.
When we were looking at the what you're afraid of and the what if, this was already built in. I just thought it might be good for people to know that's what we did. So it's all built out. That's all I was doing.
Right. Chris shared part one in the chat thread for those of you listening. If you're listening, go to VeteranTrashTalk.com, click on our YouTube link. All right, and that show's going to be there. And we got a guy, Daniel Dexter, on the chat, says, for those who want to buy term insurance and invest the difference, how do you determine where those dollars go? Qualified versus non-qualified, Roth versus traditional?
Hey, that is a great question. And it's a technical question. So everybody's situation's different. So where I would start when I'm doing my investment, I like to build up what I call a cash emergency fund. So the first place, if you have an emergency fund, fine. But if you don't, we're going to build out, make sure you have 6 months of spendable money. What if you lost your job, or what if something bad happened? So we start with the emergency fund, and then we start adding in the qualified assets. Then we start looking at long term. And whether it's an IRA and a Roth, I know Susie Orman, I've heard her say it, always go a Roth. Well, she's not right. You never say always, because let's say you don't start putting
only a set deals in absolutes.
So if you don't start putting money into your qualified plans, which is a 401k and that kind of stuff, until you're 50 and you're going to retire at 65, when you retire at 65, you're going to have a big loss of income. You're not making the 80, 100, whatever you were making. So your tax bracket's going to be lower. However, if you start at 25 and you're really diligent and you're going to save, I would say the Roths are going to do, because a regular IRA plan is before taxes. So let's say I'm making 80,000 and I'm at a 401k and I'm putting 10,000 in. It's as if I'm making 70. I'm getting a reduction. But when I take that money, when I hit retirement, all of it's going to be taxable, but I'm paying tax as I take it out. So let's say I had $1 million in my retirement plan and I pulled out $60,000. That's what I'm taxed on. The 940 that I left in there is still tax deferred. So I know that qualified plans have been trashed, the regular kind, but they shouldn't be trashed because everybody's situation is different. So we look at it on a case-by-case basis. There are no absolutes.
Right, and that's probably why people are scared and why you should pay attention to Star Wars, because
that answered our guy's question.
Yeah, it'll take him about 20 seconds probably to get all of that. And
great question.
Yeah, let's see here. As a fiduciary, you have to do a know your client questionnaire in order to determine the needs and goals of your client. Based on this information, you can start building their financial plan together. That's the field OP again. Awesome. I think we should take some of these questions because we're getting to that magic. We're past the magic 30 minutes. Here we go.
I'm done with what I wanted to show.
Right. But I was going to get into the point of where there's a lot of people who are nervous, right? That I don't know who to call. Again, this whole point of the show was to avoid, like, the main point was, there's lots of points to it, but the main point, the decisive op, was to avoid scammers. Avoid scammers that are going to take your money, bleed you dry, right? As opposed to going to an Army veteran like Ken Hewitt, who's going to record your shows, record your series, all right, so that he's actually going to, like, he can go back to it and be like, "No, look, this is what we talked about." Right. And what financial person wants to actually record it? That's a very good point. But again, the field OP, I would love it if you messaged us and messaged Ken. Maybe you can throw something in for some topics on the next show. That would be awesome. I think you answered Daniel Dexter's question because he's throwing another one out there. Chris, you want to pull that one up there? All right. Do you think the income tax tables are going to increase or decrease in the future? This sounds like somebody who knows about money a little bit, in my opinion, because that's not a question that I ever fucking ask.
They're going to go up. They're going to have to go. First of all, they're going to go up to keep Social Security solvent. So I want to go back to Social Security real quick.
Yeah, good.
There was a study that was done about 8 years ago, a survey, and they asked voters, Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, would you be willing to increase your Social Security tax from your employer by 1%, and your employer increase it if that would keep Social Security solvent for another 30 years? 81 to 82% of everyone said yes. I'm talking Republicans and Democrats agreeing because they've already been paying for it. So that's not a lot. That's a 1%. But the other reason why taxes are going to go up, I have a slide, but I don't think we have it, Chris. But if we saw the graph, we are at the lowest threshold of income taxes that we've been at in the last 100 years. Maybe we can bring that up in the next meeting, but
that's a good one to talk about. Social Security and the income tax question is a good one.
Social Security is going to have to go up to keep it going.
Right, but that's something that we can cover. Yeah, for sure.
What political party wants to be in office when there's a 25% cut to Social Security? None of them. Don't believe what you hear. Republicans don't want Social Security to go away, and neither do the Democrats. So they both want it to stay solvent. Now, that's one thing. But the other part is we have the highest deficit that we've ever had, and it's going to keep going up. So we're going to have to increase taxes to keep this country solvent. We have no choice.
Right. That's a good point. That's another thing that we could probably talk about. I bet you we get some feedback on that question and comments in the next 25 days. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But anyways, Trash Talkers, Gruntworks Nation. All right. I know you don't get the Trash Talk Hour in July and you missed the Big Earl's face, but that's why, we do these kind of special things. But I just want to let you all know, those of you listening, all right, go to VeteranTrashTalk.com. All right, click on all of our links. All right, and then if you're watching this, if you're listening to it on the podcast world, all right, go to our YouTube channel because there's a QR code up there, and there's also Ken Hewitt's number and information on there. It costs you absolutely nothing, all right, to give him a call or send him an email, all right, and ask him what we're doing. And I'm putting the Big Earl stamp on this. I'm putting Veteran Trash Talk stamp on this, and that's a lot. All right, I'm putting my stamp on it. So ask him. All right, it's not going to hurt you to ask him, and that's all we're asking you to do. We covered a lot of really cool things today on how to avoid scammers and how to look up, all right, people by name, and if they're not in there, that's probably a big sign, right? And then number two, if they're in there, it'll pop up, right?
By the way, I want to tell you, I was telling this to a friend of mine that's a president of Eddie Lee.
Yeah, Eddie, yeah.
We were talking about broker check. And he looked up the person who's in their chapter he goes, well, I'm doing this right now. He typed in broker check, typed in his rep that he's using. He goes, wow, I see her whole history here. I see her licenses. I see her disclosures, So it's a good way that if a person's got a securities license, we can't hide. It's there. We're out there in plain sight. So a lot of people just don't know to go to broker check. All
right, I love that broker checking. So watch the beginning of the show. We go through it. All right, we tell you how to avoid scammers. And again, those of you who watched Veteran Trash Talk over the past 3.5 years, you know that we bring people on here to find out who they are, right? And we bring people on here to find out if we can trust them. All right. And again, like I said, the Big Earl stamp's going on Ken Hewitt. So go ahead and give him a call. All right. Send him an email right there at khewitt@vanderbiltsecurities.com, scrolling across the bottom, or scan the QR code. All right. Pay attention to your events tab on Veteran Trash Talk and Gruntworks, because we will be putting out the third part of the series. It might go to a 4. All right. But I'm hoping that it doesn't have to. But actually, I'm hoping it does. I'm hoping it goes to 5, 6, and 7 because it's working that well for Ken. So let's get, let's help another veteran out, but also he's here to help all of us in this community out. All right. So we all get to mutually support each other. Weird how a community works. So let's get that going. And until then, we will see you on Friday for our UFC fight show, where we will release the ad to this show on that fight show. So I'm putting the pressure on Chris because he only has a couple days to do it. So we'll get that ad created and we're going to knock it out of the park. We will see you guys Friday night at 2100 Eastern time for our UFC fight pickup. All right, guys, have a good one.